Welcome to Women in the Music Industry, the podcast that shines a spotlight on the remarkable women who are breaking barriers and making their mark in an industry that has long been dominated by men. I'm your host, Rob Wells, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on this empowering journey. Each episode of this podcast will be dedicated to exploring the inspiring stories, accomplishments, and struggles of the extraordinary women who have defied the odds and made waves in the music business. Together, we'll delve into the journeys of female artists, songwriters, producers, musicians, managers, executives, and all those who have helped play a pivotal role behind the scenes. We'll uncover the stories that deserve to be heard, as well as celebrate the triumphs, challenges, and unique perspectives that women bring to the music industry. Whether you're a fan of music, an aspiring artist, or simply curious about the inner workings of the music business, this podcast will offer a valuable perspective. Together, we'll celebrate the power of music and the strength of these inspiring women. So join us as we amplify their voices and together pave the way for a future where women in the music business are no longer the exception, but the rule. Today's podcast is sponsored by the Songwriter's Piano, an easy-to-use app for songwriters and lyricists to use when coming up with song ideas when there's no instrument around or nobody to play one. With the Songwriter's Piano, one can easily play commonly used pop songwriting chord sequences at the touch of a screen, in any key, in 3 different chord variations, all played on a gorgeously recorded grand piano. Download the Songwriter's Piano by Play Like Me apps today, found on both iOS and Android stores everywhere. Welcome everyone to another episode of Women in the Music Industry. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome to the podcast. For those of you who have been here before, welcome back. My guest today is none other than the current CEO of Music Publishers Canada, Margaret McGuffin. Margaret's career has focused on research and policy development related to the creative industries, as well as strategic change management. She has worked with a large number of music industry trade organizations and collective management organizations, and currently sits on the boards of Theatre Museum of Canada and on the advisory committee at Musicounts. She recently left the board of Work in Culture. Margaret is always happy to talk about copyright and how music publishers are leading the way in making sure Canadian songs are heard around the world. She holds a bachelor's degree in political science from Western University and an MBA in arts, media, and entertainment management from the Schulich School of Business. Margaret is an incredibly busy individual, as you can see just from this bio, and we are more than delighted that she said yes to being on this podcast. Margaret McGuffin, we are not worthy to have you, but you are here, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Anytime. I would love to have you for this podcast and maybe many others that are coming down the road, because there's so much that we can talk about. I'm in absolute awe of you and your drive, your determination, your work ethic. You are constantly on the go, constantly trying to make this world a better place for songwriters, for Canadian songs to get out there, and just all the different committees that you're on and all the different things that you basically have your finger on the pulse of. You're very inspiring, and I don't know when you ever sleep, when you ever relax. Does that ever even happen in your life?
Oh, well, it's much easier now. My kids are off at university or just graduated, so it's a less busy household than it was pre-COVID.
That's true. But I always see your posts and I see that you're traveling here, you're traveling there. I remember when we were just trying to book this podcast, I think you were off to Milan for some business, and my head spins just thinking about your schedule.
Well, it sounded very glamorous, and it was a very nice place to visit, but also we're sitting there and talking about metadata and AI for 3 days. So really interesting topics to be traveling to Milan for.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I would love to be just a fly on the wall for all the meetings that you get to be a part of, and just to be able to hear all the great conversations that are going on in this world, especially studying about AI and its future in the music industry and how it can help, how it can also, maybe not help, and all the pluses and minuses of all that. But before we get into all that, I know that there's a human being behind all this, and I know that there's a career path that you had that is individual to you, And I would so love to know a little bit more about you and how did everything start? Where did a love of music begin? Where did a love of business begin? Where did this passion for helping others begin? Can you take it back, just rewind the clock a little bit and let me know how that all began?
Sure. I grew up in a really small town outside of London, Ontario. So community was a really important part of keeping busy in a small town. So I was singing in the local choir, church choir when I was quite young, and getting involved. And my parents always had music on. I remember my mom playing Johnny Cash and the Irish Descendants, and turning on the Tommy Hunter show. There was music always there, and my aunts and my cousins were amazing musicians. And in that era, there was a piano in every home, and everybody took piano lessons.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I remember that the piano was just like a piece of furniture that was always around, and we had one. All my friends had one. It just seemed like that was part of everybody's living room back then.
Yeah, it was great. And then a lot of the weekends were. It was small communities, so it was often around dances and concerts and church events where music was the center of everything going on.
Mm-hmm. And were you involved in bands and playing in various organizations?
I was a bit of an amateur musician. I took music lessons. I sang in the choir. I loved music, but I sort of learned at one point that I was the person who loved organizing things as opposed to being at the front of the stage. Although my first job was as a church organist when I was 16. And that continued until I was in university, and it paid the rent when I went to Western. I would, have choir practice on a Thursday night and play on a Sunday, and was able to pay my rent while I was going to university at Western.
Playing the organ is no small feat. I mean, was it a full blown organ with foot pedals and everything else?
A little bit. I don't know if I mastered all of it completely, but I got by, and I enjoyed the experience.
My brother and I, we were always so impressed by the organ at my dad's church. My dad was a United Church minister, and we would always, try to break into the church after church was over and turn on the organ as much as possible and just see what we could do. And there's one time where actually my brother and I, we broke a stained glass window because of playing the pipe organ too loud. We started playing the 2 foot pedals, 2 notes right beside each other, and turned the volume up all the way. So like the lowest possible notes on the pipe organ. And the whole church was just going from this vibration that we were creating in there. And then a stained glass window totally shattered, and we ran for our lives. But my brother now has a pipe organ in his house in Los Angeles. Which is very, very cool.
Yeah, we were able to meet your brother a number of years ago. So, and he's was involved, I think, in our first year of our Women in the Studio program, which you are now all the time. So.
Oh yeah, I'd love to talk about that as well. So okay, you're playing pipe organ, the organ for the church, and you're going to Western. Again, you went to Western not necessarily for music, though. You went for political science.
No, absolutely. I was a bit of a political science geek and loved history courses, English courses, political science, spent a lot of time analyzing what the electoral vote would be in the presidential election in the US when they were happening, and went in focused on political science as my major, but taking courses in visual arts. So when I was at Western, I got very involved in theater production, first as a course, but then in stage managing the campus productions. Really, I found that was my skill. It was getting things organized behind the stage, making sure we met those cues. I stage managed summer production, children's productions, the annual English productions. And then in my 4th year, I was theater commissioner at Western and produced the Gilbert and Sullivan, the musical, and the production that was on stage. And so that suddenly gave me, I had a real budget. There was community theater involved, not just university productions. And then I was the stage manager for the English production and had the great fortune to be mentored by some of the technical people who were brought in from Shaw. And that's when I started considering, wow, I can actually do this as a career. So I was studying political science, but then spending all my time in the theater. And I just loved it so much. I thought, I'm going to become a stage manager. I applied to Banff. That was set. That's what I wanted to do next. And one of the mentors from Shaw said, there was a great arts and media MBA at York. And I was like, MBA? I had a roommate who was in biz school. I had no interest in that line of work at all. And suddenly someone connected the fact that, oh, there's a business side to the entertainment and theater industry. And so I applied, I got in. And suddenly I was at York, which is now the Schulich MBA program in arts, media, and entertainment.
That's fantastic.
And that changed my life.
And were you still involved in productions with theatrical productions and stage managing at that point, or was that just a Western university?
Well, that was at Western. And then I moved to Toronto. My family are very big on volunteering. So my father was very involved in so many different things. My grandmother lived with us, and there was always something going on. It was always a volunteer activity. So I got to Toronto. I was in my MBA, and within a couple of years, I was like, where can I volunteer? And so I followed a path and walked into the doors of UNICEF Canada, and suddenly I was putting together events. We did an event called Beyond the Orange Box, where we fundraised for UNICEF with bands playing, and I was producing shows. And then we were one of the first organizations to look at local wineries and chefs and pull together a fundraising event for Chefs for UNICEF, where I met amazing people and raised $100,000. So that set me up also. And so one of my pieces of advice to anyone I talk to is you shouldn't work for free. And if you're working, you should get paid. But there is an element where you may want to consider where you're volunteering, and it's something that's continued. I've met so many people who are important to me personally and professionally by volunteering over the last many years.
It usually starts from somewhere, though, doesn't it? Like it started from your parents, and
always my parents.
Much in the same way, my dad, my mom, I would see them volunteering all the time, and I would see them giving back to the community in whatever way that they could. And it was just a really great life lesson to see that sometimes it isn't just all about making money. It's just how can you make the world a better place?
And it was really fortunate for me, because so I really gravitated in my MBA years into not-for-profit management. I was really interested in how boards worked, even at that point before I was actually sitting on boards or managing boards. And that was a part of the policy work and courses that I took at York were so important to what I do now in terms of building out boards and advising them on how they work best. And that's very important to what we do in the music industry now. But I also met great people who I keep in touch with from that MBA, the arts and media community from York. We are strong, and it goes back to the early 1970s of grads to recent grads. And we have a really strong network. So that's been important for me. And I also interned when I was there at what is word on the street now in the Toronto Arts Awards. And that led me to my first music job. Doesn't make sense, but that's how I got my first job.
You went from theater, producing and management, and then the shows that you were doing for UNICEF, they were music shows that you were doing? It was with bands?
They were music shows, because I always loved music. I was always going out. The first show I ever saw in Toronto was Blue Rodeo, right? So continued to go to the Horseshoe a lot, the Cameron House. I was at Sky Diggers, Andrew Cash, Blue Rodeo girl, and we would, travel around Ontario to see them, and we're routinely out every weekend at Lee's Palace and different venues.
Thank goodness for people like you. Like I remember in high school, I was in a lot of music theater productions and I was acting on the stage, and there would be a lot of people that would be behind the scenes. They'd either be doing set construction or they'd be setting up, the scenes when the lights would go down, the curtains would close, they'd go quickly and set things up. People that were involved in lighting, they were involved in sound and everything. And I remember in high school thinking, why would you want to do that? Don't you want to be on stage? But then thank goodness there were these people that were behind the scenes that were actually there to help support, or else the whole thing wouldn't take off at all. It's just as important to have the people behind the scenes as it is those on stage. And sometimes I think even more important to have those people behind the scenes, and then to have you involved in musical productions and bands and raising money for UNICEF. I can see already where this path is taking you, and just you continue doing that still today.
Well, and I had the opportunity to perform when I was a kid, and that just wasn't for me. When I found stage management, I really found that's what I love, and I love driving the creative process. And not necessarily being the person on the stage. And even so, it was kind of funny. In my fourth year of university, I was already stage managing. And one of the guys that I stage managed, I saw him at a party one night, and he's like, "You're really small. I'm under 5 feet tall. And you're really bossy, and you've stage managed me. Will you be our coxie on our rowing team?" So I ended up in fourth year also as the coxie on the rowing team. Because it was the same qualities, apparently, being the coxie as it was stage managing.
Forgive me for asking, because I'm not sure what exactly. Is that the person that's at the front?
That's the person who yells at the team and keeps them rowing together.
Wow. So you keep the tempo, you keep the time, and then you also have to
watch out as to where you decrease it, you set the strategy. The coach lays out the strategy, and the coxie is the one who implements it with the team.
And do you have the view of where they're going, or do you have to keep looking behind you?
Yeah, you have the view. They don't. So.
Right. There's absolute trust that has so much trust that has to be given by the rower.
Which is same as stage managing, right? It is actually very similar.
Absolutely. Okay, so what was your first music job that you got out of all this that you were leading to?
I was really fortunate when I was interning at the Toronto Arts Awards that the president there introduced me to Brian Robertson, who was the head president of what is now Music Canada. And so my very first job was working at what was then AVLA and is now Connect, licensing DJs. So I was licensing DJs. I was licensing Much Music. I was suddenly getting into the nuts and bolts of the music business licensing side of things for the labels and the artists. And the deal with Brian always was, he was a great mentor. If you get your work done, you can also sit in on meetings on government lobbying. And I'm the political science nerd. I love that stuff. I love the policy work. And so I'd get my work done so that I could sit in on the government meetings. And it was at the point where we had a lobbyist in Ottawa, all the different groups, the independent labels, all of the publishers were working together to get private copying levies and to get neighboring rights in Canada for the first time. So I spent as much time as I could doing that side of things. And I remember at one point spending a day visiting, taking a flight to Windsor to meet with an MP, then driving to London to meet with other MPs, and stopping, I think, in Stratford along the way. And I just fell in love with that world of explaining the music industry to politicians and why royalties were the paychecks for these artists in their communities. And we needed the change in legislation. So we got those changes in legislation, and that then launched me on the next part of my career.
Wow. So was it bothering you in any sort of way that you're now moving further away from live performance and being involved in shows to now you're sort of more in an office environment, or was it, this was just a very nice natural progression where you could use all of your background?
Well, the beautiful thing about being in the music industry is there's lots of side benefits of going to see shows as part of your job
Yes, yes.
while you were doing that work in the office. So I felt like my job was so much more interesting than a lot of my friends who had graduated with an MBA. Plus, I was going and seeing concerts, going to the Junos, and that was part of my job.
Yeah, I know. It's funny. A lot of people think that my life is very glamorous, being a songwriter and producer, but really, like, you're seeing it right here. Like, this is where I work out of. It's a room, kind of looks like a doctor's office, although I've got a couple of keyboards here. But I sit in front of a laptop and work all day, and it's not really all that glamorous, but the benefits are that, exactly like you said, like if there's a show happening in town, I usually have a connection that I can go and see the show and meet the people and hang out. And so, you can occasionally dip into that world and enjoy it, but then you can get out as well. I'm a lot like you. I don't really, really like performance that much. I much prefer creating content for the performers. And as long as I know the songs are getting out there and living a life out there, then I'm quite happy to remain here and remain faceless as well. Just a little few times my name gets out there, but nobody knows who I am when I go get groceries or sit at a restaurant or anything. It's quite nice.
Yeah, and really, the work that the associations do in the music industry, a lot of that is getting the ideas out there, stage managing behind the scenes so that we can present to government who you are, what you're doing, Rob, so that they understand the reason for their policy decisions, whether it's regulatory or legislative. They don't understand the music industry. They don't understand all the players. And I learned early at that first job about how to pull the data together, how much the statistics are so important, how you need to feed into the government policy decisions the right information on what the music industry is doing, how it's so successful around the world, and the stats that help you prove that point. So it was a perfect blend of my love for the arts with my real interest in the policy side and the data side,
and helping your fellow human being out as well, like your fellow musical human being, because it's so interesting, that with the government, it's forever a changing cast of characters that's in government and in politics. And so with every new MP that would come along, it's almost like you'd need to educate them as well. And it's a never ending educational process, I would think. I know that certain policies get into place, but then there's still new people that are coming in that may not understand how the music industry works. And thank goodness.
It's amazing when you talk to an MP or a staffer. So many of them have that favorite music teacher or that favorite song that's so important in their life. Or there's a local community center where music's heard all the time. Music's in every community across Canada. And while we are mostly meeting with people in Ottawa and Toronto, there is a writer or an artist or a theater owner in every single community. And they're really important people in that community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Sorry, I feel like we're getting off track right now, but you were going to, no, I love it. I love all these tangents. They're great. May they continue. You then were saying that you got your second job in your career, which was?
And so I connected with one of my professors from York, Paul Audley. And it was at the point where he was involved with a lot of film and television tax credit organizations. And I was really interested in moving, broadening my horizon from music and moving into film and television policy. And I moved over to his shop. He had a small consulting shop. So I joined Paul and instantly got the contract to start working with the organizations that were setting the rates with the copyright board for both neighboring rights and private copying. So I didn't actually leave music. And I was very involved over the course of 11 years on 15 tariffs. So setting the first rate that commercial radio stations would play in neighboring rights, setting the first tariff for private copying leverage. So in those days, it was cassettes and CDs, and there was almost $40 million a year collected to go to artists and labels and songwriters and publishers. And it was really exciting to be there, defending the rights of all these rights holders and these creators and the companies investing in them. And we once again explained what the music industry was to the Copyright Board, which is a semi-judicial process, sort of judge-like people who listen to all the evidence and set a rate that is paid, whether it's a commercial radio station or the blank levy people. And we moved on around 18 years ago of setting the rates for publishers and songwriters for what Apple was going to pay for their download store. And so really they're at the beginning where the rates were being set to make sure that songwriters and publishers were going to get paid when Apple entered the market. And then those rates, we moved on to what the streaming services would be paying when they entered the Canadian market.
Wow. And this world that you're in right now, for setting rates for all these different technologies that are coming out, it is moving faster every year. And there's new technologies that are coming out all the time. Does it happen that what you've set for Apple and for streaming, does that just then apply to any new technology that comes in to Canada? Or do you have to go in and figure it all out for every single technology?
Well, I'm not involved in that role anymore, although I'm very close to it. It's very different according to any new service launching. There's a nuance to it. So the negotiations stay the same, but then morph and change at the same time.
Okay. Interesting. Boy, I feel like this is just a world that I know so very little about, but again, it's very important to me because this is how I earn an income. And
I've been very fortunate to see the sausage being made and understand where it works and where it doesn't work. And so it's really interesting work. It's really important work. And I feel now that we're entering that next stage on AI. But we'll hold that. I know we're going to hold that for a bit. Yes. I can take you through the rest of my career path.
Yes, please. Yeah, I want to hear it all. Where did you go from then at that point?
So I had 2 kids, 2 babies during that period. And my life changed quite a bit. And that's been really important. Once again, I'm a compulsive volunteer. So I started joining school councils, daycare boards. I was a manager of girls hockey teams. I was team trainer for a girls hockey team. So wow. I got very involved in my community life while still holding jobs related to the music industry. And went off to the book world for a little bit. Same on the same type of thing. It's on how the royalty collections for authors and book publishers. So the same type of work, but on the book side.
Yeah.
And really, really missed all my music friends. So about 10 years ago, I came back and did some consulting and a short term at what's the Musicians' Rights Organization, MROC, and then went over and joined a former client, CMRA, and went in and was part of their senior staff before getting the invitation 8 years ago to join as CEO of Music Publishers Canada.
Wow, I feel like you just breezed past all those very important steps, though. So many things that I want to know, like CMRA. Could you explain to everybody what that organization is and what they do for people?
Yeah, so CMRA is really important to songwriters and music publishers in this country. They in the original era of CMRA, they were collecting 2 cents or a few cents every time a label would record a song. The publisher and the songwriter needed to be paid. And that was their initial work. That's called the mechanical, and still that's a role that they fulfill. But as we got into the digital era, they were the company, the agency that was working for publishers and songwriters to make sure there was a payment. There was a payment to SOCAN on to these new streaming services when they launched Spotify and Apple. But there was also a second payment on the mechanical side, the reproduction side, and that was a great role that I started on the consulting side, helping to set the rates. And then I moved over into the senior management side. And here we're much more concerned about, are we doing everything that the stakeholders needed us to do? Were there new lines of business that we needed to be looking at? And it gave me the first opportunity to look at the industry outside of Canada, which I loved. And so I had lots of opportunity to be meeting with our clients in the US and to be looking at how rates are set around the world. And I just love that. I loved being able to look at best practices from around the world and say, oh, that's how they're setting the rates there. Maybe we can learn something and bring that back to Canada, or I don't like the way they're doing that, and we need to do something different.
This is something that I'm learning. I didn't realize that every country had its own rate set. I thought it was just some sort of like global thing that had been figured out by one organization or whatever, and then it just applies to everybody.
In some cases. It is in some cases, but in other cases, Canada's really led the world in getting some of the higher rates for publishers and songwriters. And there's a lot of great work that's been done in the US over the last few years around the MLC. We were already doing that in Canada with CMRA. We were decades ahead, and it was very functional. And both SOCAN and CMRA have the opportunity to work with them on a weekly basis, and they're investing in technology. They're dealing with billions of lines of data, and they're making sure the songwriters and music publishers are paid.
Wow. It still blows me away that there's some parts of the world that don't have any protections for their songwriters. I remember going to the island of St. Vincent and being told that in the Caribbean, there's a lot of nations that just don't have any access to royalty streams at all. And so they rely basically on live performance. They'll release a song, it'll go to radio, it'll play a whole bunch, and then they'll say, yeah, I'm playing at Carnival at this time, and then they play a couple of shows, and that's it. That's their way of just sort of like advertising for themselves, and there's no mechanism in place for them to receive any further royalty stream after.
I think we're very lucky in Canada to have such leading edge collective management organizations with CMRA and SOCAN. And these organizations care about songwriters, they care about publishers, they care about composers, but they're also data companies. They're investing in technology and bringing in the right people. So we know how to license those new technologies as they emerge, and to make sure those payments, those micropayments get out and are aggregated and are paid out to you and to your publisher.
Absolutely. I've been doing this professionally I've been signed to a publisher since 2005. And over that time, I've seen such an increase in the quality of reporting. Is that because like everything's gone to a digital environment, that whenever anything gets played anywhere, there's a digital log of that? It's not somebody just filling out a form at a radio station or whatever. Like it just seems like there's a lot more accountability worldwide to reporting all of these things.
Well, there's some companies who are better at others at doing them. And I would say some of these technologies companies should prioritize a little bit more. But generally, there's good data, and it's all based on metadata. And the publishing side of the world is really adopted good metadata earlier. There's lots of work to do. But when I talk about metadata, everybody, I don't want to talk about metadata. I don't want to talk about copyright, but you've got to think about that's your paycheck, and it's important to think about your paycheck. So how am I going to get paid? Well, if I join SOCAN or CMRA, and then I go and I will get an individual number from SOCAN that's called your IPI. Because we love you, Rob Wells, but there's other Rob Wells in the world who write, and we want to make sure that you have your fingerprint of your IPI. So if you go into your SOCAN account, you're going to see on the top right your IPI. Memorize it, know it, exchange it every time you have a co-write. And that's going to help you then be make sure the right Rob Wells is paid. So you have that number, your publisher has their own number, and then you'll write a song. And then you'll see suddenly beside your song that you've registered with SOCAN, an international standard work code, ISWC. And it's like, oh, another number. But that number is unique to that song. And it may have the same title as 100 other songs, but it's like a fingerprint for the song. And if we can get that out into the world and get Spotify to use it and get that reported back to SOCAN and CMRA, it's going to you as Rob Wells are going to get paid for your song in a timely manner.
I have to tell you something funny. The Christmas song, Chestnuts Roasting on an Open Fire, is written by Mel Torme and Rob Wells. And
another Rob Wells.
Yes. And the amount of times that I've looked on my SOCAN report and it's there where it's been attached to me, and I have to call them up and say, not the same person at all. I was once called by Universal Music because I guess Justin Bieber was putting out a Christmas record, including that song. And they said to me, we want to know where you were when you wrote this, because we want to know if we can consider that song as CanCon or not, Canadian content. And I had to tell them, I said, I would have had to have had a time machine to go back and write that song and then come forward and, you would
love the royalties, but they're not your royalties.
I know. Yeah. So that needs to get figured out. Whoever's listening to this, if you can go through and just make sure, absolutely sure that I'm not that Rob Wells.
Well, and that's the exciting potential about AI and about new technology is this exchange of data is going to get more and more efficient. We're already quite efficient, but there's lots of potential to make sure you're paid even faster.
Wow, that's amazing. That's incredible. Okay, so sorry, I glanced over you saying that you then came into Music Publishers Canada. How did that come about? Did you get approached by that team? Were you interested always in going into this organization, or I'll just let you take over from there?
It was an organization I knew very well because I'd been involved with SOCAN and CMRA in the past, and I knew all the players in the space, the Songwriters Association of Canada, the Screen Composers Guild of Canada, and Music Publishers Canada. And when I was working at CMRA, the publishers came to me and said, we really think you're the person to lead this, and would you be interested? And it really is my dream job.
Tell me everything they do. For those that are listening, what does Music Publishers Canada do?
Absolutely. I'd love to tell you more about Music Publishers Canada. When I started, the vast majority of my time was spent lobbying. So talking to politicians again. And I love doing that. I love the storytelling. I love the important conversations. But we've built a lot more than just the advocacy and lobbying side of the business since I started 8 years ago. I've been very lucky to build a strong team. You interviewed Kim Temple, who's the head of my creative side of Music Publishers Canada.
Love Kim.
I love Kim. And we have Maya and Laura also, who are part of the team. We're a pretty mighty foursome. And I also have really strong board members. Sony Publishing, Gary Furness, who you know quite well as your publisher, is also on my board of directors. And I have a really active board of directors with a really small staff. We need to have the people who will be there to listen, to help me with the decision making, but also then get involved. So people like Michelle Pack in the Sony office, who you know well, is part of our Women in the Studio advisory, along with Vivian Barkley, who is the chair of my board and is from Warner Chappell, and Cheryl Link. So the three of them really have invested a lot of time in Women in the Studio, along with many mentors like you. So a lot of our programs been being driven by our small team, our board, our members, and just so many volunteers. Fantastic.
I can't say enough good things about the Women in the Studio program. I think it's amazing. I think it's incredible how you take a certain amount of people from the beginning to the end, and they go through such an amazing program, such a transformation in their time in your program. And they end up doing the most amazing things when they leave your program. Writing for film, writing for television, producing for others, really
opening their own studios.
Opening their own studios. Yes, it's great. This is my dream. I've said this many times on the podcast, but I'll say it again because I really want it out there. I want so many female-led studios out there. I want safe spaces for female artists, those that identify as female, anything where they can go in and they can work all hours of the day and feel like it's all about the music and it's all just that is my dream for sure. I've seen a lot of weirdness over my time in the music industry, very male dominated. And I would love to see it 50-50 all the way. Love for that to happen. Absolutely. And I think you're doing a great thing with that. I think it's a great thing if anyone's listening, if you are in Canada and you are interested in learning more about music in the studio, women in the studio. I think that's a great program to be involved in, to learn about production, to learn about the music industry, to learn from some great people like you, Margaret, and a lot of the other mentors that are involved in it.
Yes. I'll talk about some of our other programs, but for Women in the Studio, we will be looking for producers, women, non-binary and gender fluid producers who are already producing for others and who are songwriters. That's a very important part of who we put through this program. And if your listeners are interested, watch our socials and our website in March, and we'll be taking new applications for our program that's going to launch in June.
That's amazing. Now, when you say that they have to be songwriters, does that mean that they have to be both lyricists and musical people? Or do you sometimes take people that are just in the lyrical side of things, maybe somebody that is just more on the musical side of things? Or what do you look for?
Well, they need to be producing too, but they could be a lyricist. They could be doing melody. They could be making beats.
Cool.
We've had self-taught beat makers join the program, but we've also had experienced program producers and engineers who have had technical degrees behind them. We're able to adapt the technical and creative portions of the program to match the skills of those coming in. They just need to be already working in the field. And there's other programs, great programs like SoCan Foundation's Equity X program for artists who are just learning production or songwriters just starting to dabble. And this is the next level up for those who are already working and want to take their career to the next level.
Amazing. Amazing. I love that. I'm such a big fan of that. And I'm going to put that out there. Any more help that you need from me, you can count me in for that.
We love your help and thank you so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Tell me about some of the other programs that you have going on at Music Publishers Canada.
Yeah. So music publishers in Canada are really global in their focus. So for our members, I was a researcher, as you know, and 18 years ago when I was working with Paul Audley, we worked with the Government of Canada. And for music publishers at that point, 18 years ago, only about 20% of the Canadian music publishers' revenue was coming from foreign sources. So they had domestic signings. They were working in Canada. That was the focus of their company and of the creatives who they have signed to their roster. Mm-hmm. Fast forward to our data last year, and we see that for independent music publishers in Canada, 71% of the revenues coming from foreign territories.
Wow.
That means that the composers and the songwriters who they represent are going global. They're writing in Korea, they're writing in Germany. You may not even hear their songs on Canadian radio or Canadian streaming because they're in Korean, Japanese, Punjabi. We're really seeing the power of what Canadians can do in the writing room. And you know about this because you've written in some of those other territories and there's songs that we've never heard of yours. But I think it's something that the Canadian market on the label, artist and agent side, they don't really understand that this is happening in the Canadian music publishing world. Mm-hmm. We definitely have regional publishers and publishers focusing on Canadian songs for Canadian artists, but we have others who spend most of their time looking at how they can get their writer into an international writing room.
Wow. I've also, that's another thing that I've seen change so much over my time in the music industry. At the very beginning, I would be writing and it was just for Canadian artists. And the only airplay that was happening was within Canada. That's totally changed, with streaming, with the fact that you can go and listen to any music from any corner of the planet right away on your phone. Instantly, like when I look at my report from SOCAN, I get to see all these different countries that are playing the music all over the place. Which brings me to an interesting thing that I'm curious to know from you. I was thinking back in the day, the time in which you should probably reach out to get a publisher involved is when you're starting to get music happening outside of the territory where you are, and you need help in collecting all those things. Now that just seems like it's right away for any artist that is putting out music. Your music's going to be heard all over the place, all over the. So when do you think should people be looking for a publisher? When's the right time?
I think some writers will always be able to manage their own affairs or will want to manage their own affairs. And people have to understand that is an option. I think what you're going to find is that when you start co-writing with others, publishers are going to come to you. It's not necessarily you going to the publisher. Mm-hmm. And it's going to happen at the time when they feel you have the right connection to their staff and their creative team. And that there is a point where it makes sense for them to join the rest of your team. So the manager who may come first along with the publisher. Often it's a label who comes later these days, but it's really important that you're considering your publisher as part of a team and not just, oh yeah, and I have a publisher, which I think many people 20 years ago did. I have a label deal now. I'm going to just have a secondary publishing deal. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to be the publisher who is probably going to find you. They're often finding you because you're co-writing with other people who are on their roster already. Mm-hmm. And they're going to work out to be highly productive for you if there's a lot of thought into how they fit into your general strategy as a creator and your long-term plan as part of the team.
Mm-hmm. I think you hit the nail on the head, though, at the beginning, like when you said there's a lot that you can do. There's a lot that you can self-manage yourself before joining forces with a publisher. And I've always related it to baseball. Just, you're standing at home plate. You can hit the ball yourself. You can run to first base, and it's really hard to get there, but you do eventually get to first base. And then you get to second base, and then you get to third base miraculously somehow. And the minute that you're at third base and you're ready to run home, where you're doing a lot on your own, then if you join forces with a really great person at a publishing company, or they see the potential that you're about to get a home run or you're about to score a point for your team. If you join forces with somebody that wants to work just as hard as you are, and make this not just 1 point, but make it 100 points. I think that's always a good time in which to be looking for somebody. There's a lot of people that want to sign a publishing deal right away. And I think it can be very early on in your career. I think you need to do a bit of the hard work yourself first.
And you got to make sure that you know what you want out of a publishing deal.
Yeah.
Because if you're not understanding why you're signing that publishing deal, it may not work out for you.
True.
I often say it's a lot like dating. So you can tell me if this is you were telling me a while ago about how you met your publisher, but it's a bit like dating. Not everybody's a good match. You need to understand who's on the team. Do you want them there just to admin your royalties and do your registrations because you're just tired of doing that? Or is it because they're offering something to you in terms of the contacts they have globally or the creative advice when you write that song and you need feedback? Mm-hmm. Not everybody needs the same thing, and not every publisher is offering the same resources and deal. And so it's really important to date a little bit and to understand if there's a good fit before you get married.
Absolutely. I was sharing with you, and I can share with the listeners, that at one point I had 3 publishers approach me at pretty much the same time. And I found out who their writers were. I knew some of them already, but then I found out some more. And I went and I approached all those writers and just asked them, what do you think of your publisher? First of all, is it somebody that you can hang out with? Is it somebody that you can have a laugh with? Because to me, like that's almost like right up there as one of the most important things. Can you get along? Can you sit in a boat with them in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and not want to throw each other overboard?
That's a good test.
Right?
I love that.
Totally. That one. And then also, like, are they just as excited to work with you as you are with them? Are they as driven as you are? Do you see the same way that, you know, this is your plan, this is where you want to go? Do they believe in that? Do they champion that? Do they want to join forces with you and make it a much bigger thing? And out of the three that I was approached by, there was one that clearly came through, and that's who I ended up signing with. Not that there's anything wrong with the other publishers, but it's just I would get some varying degrees of happiness and just general displeasure. But just with the one that I signed with, it was all good. It was all like full marks from everybody, 5 out of 5. And they all just said, absolutely go for it. So it's been great. And I've still with them almost 20 years now, and same team. It's really pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is. And it is a great team, but that team may not be a good match for another writer. So it is really individual and personal. And I think you need to get the lawyers and the managers and the involved in the decision making, but at the end of the day, it's got to be the right fit for you as a creative.
Absolutely. And everyone's path and journey is completely different from everyone else. So it's an individual thing. Can we talk about the future? You've been alluding to AI a couple of times, and I would love to know how AI plays into the near future and how you see it playing out in the long run.
Well, AI is not new. Everybody started talking about it, and I've spent most of my last 2 weeks reading and talking about it, as well as the last year. But AI has been around. You're using AI generative AI in the studio every day, Rob, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing for us to talk about is the music industry has been embracing AI. We're early adopters. Publishing especially. We love tech. We want our music in new streaming services. We want them in games. We want to look at new innovations in the studio. We've been doing this. What we don't want is companies who scrape all of our songs and all of your lyrics and then use it to train models that then are sold to the consumer for a profit that hedge funds and investors invest in and have no money go back to the songwriter. So when I look at AI, I look at it with hope. I look at it as great opportunities for innovation, for creativity. But I want to make sure there are guardrails around, and that the companies involved in doing the training or building out new consumer products or B2B products, business products, are paying for what they're using. If a new company is going to build something else that is trained with Rob Wells songs, Rob Wells needs to get paid. There needs to be a royalty. You need to have a paycheck. You have a house. You have kids. You need to continue to create. And so when I look at AI, it's with great hope, but we don't want AI research companies to be coming into Canada and convincing the government that they need huge carve-outs so they don't have to pay royalties to songwriters and music publishers.
Wow. How is that fight going so far?
It's not a fight, it's a conversation.
Okay.
And if people want to go to my website at musicpublishing.ca under resources, they're going to see the paper we just filed. Much of it's very legal based. We have technical experts involved in this discussion. And it's going to be something that we continue to have an open dialogue on over the next couple of years. We just don't want any sudden changes to copyright or sudden changes to government policy that allows theft to happen.
Wow. Again, championing us, the songwriter, helping your fellow human being, your musical human being. I love that. What other things are you excited about in the future, or things that, can you talk about certain things that you're working on right now with the
Sure.
government?
I'm going to go back to Music Publishers Canada, and I'm really proud of a new movement within our organization that's being led by the next generation of music publishers. So 18 months ago, we launched our Next Gen program. And we want to make sure that we're providing young publishers with the networking and training and the opportunities they need to take my place and to take the senior roles on the SOCAN board at music publishing companies to build their own music publishers. Was very lucky to start in this industry really early and go to a lot of industry events. I continue to go, and I see a lot of the same people. And so what we've managed to accomplish with Next Gen is to find all the other people working in music publishing and those interested in music publishing, and have them out and networking and getting to know one another early in their career. And so we now have a Next Gen programming that occurs every couple months. We have mentorship sessions. We just did a export trip to Atlanta. Most of the group on that trip were Next Gen. And we also are really interested in listening to them about the programming they want. So we have a board, we have a programming committee, but now we have a Next Gen steering committee. And the things that group wants to do and need from us as an organization is very different than some of my board members. And so we're finding that as we go into 2024, a lot of our programming is being designed by Next Gen. And so we're able to really have more publishers involved, train more future publishers, and really start in our next year programming of connecting to gaming, to the screen composers, to the Music Managers Forum with Next Gen events, and not all of the other events we do. We still do those events, and they're really important. Things like our Music Tech Summit every year and our activations around the Junos and Canadian Music Week. But we also now have other programming that really is just catering to building future leaders.
I love that. Some of these programs, are they open to the public? The tech expo that you had, is that something that anybody could join, or do you need to be part of a certain organization to be in there?
It is for our members. We bring in Spotify and TikTok and the different AI companies to talk to our members, and that's a member only event. But for the first time this year, we actually offered programming, and it was open to screen composers and to songwriters and to our Next Gen members who were not members of MBC. And so we're starting to build that out. I'm always also really interested to talk to music students and to those just graduating from programs. And we offer our services anytime. I love going out, and my team loves going out, and our publishers love going out and speaking about music publishing in the community.
Fantastic. I mean, this is an area that really is exploding and will continue to explode just as we go forward. There's so many opportunities now than there ever were before for getting your music placed in video games and TV and film, all the streaming services that are going on, all the commercials that are out there. There's just such a need for this, and there's a need for more publishers, new publishers, the Next Gen publishers that are coming around. So it's great that you were so ahead of the curve, and just I love the fact that you're going to be so ready, and so many people are going to be ready thanks to the wonderful programs.
It just adds new energy to the organization, and we're loving this aspect of we got out of COVID, and suddenly we just burst out of COVID with new ideas, and that's coming from all of our current board members, but then also the Next Gen group and our women in the studio producers.
Fantastic. I love it all. I love it all. This is great. I want to be very respectful of your time. I thank you so much for being here, Margaret. I'm just wondering if we could just close with one final thing. I love to give an opportunity for you to give something back to the next generation that's coming up. And what does it take to be someone like Margaret McGuffin, in order to go through all these different avenues that you've taken, personality traits, work ethic, love of this or that. Just, I'll let you take over from that. Any words of advice that you could give to the next generation?
I would advise anybody who loves music to look at all the roles within the music industry. There's a lot of hidden ones that you do not know, and it's not a straight line. If you love what you're doing, take a volunteer gig, get involved in your community, always get paid where you need to get paid, but it's not a straight line. And my 10-year-old self did not know that you could get a job as a government lobbyist. I grew up in small town Ontario. That was just so out of the ordinary of a job that I could possibly do. I didn't know existed. And so there's going to be a lot of jobs you don't know exist. And there are going to be a lot of opportunities that are going to grow out of new technology. Be open to that and look at the path that may not be the straight line to get you to what you're going to love. You need to love your job. I love my job. I love music. They're both combined. My daughter, who's 22, is graduated and has started to go out to see bands all the time. It is so exciting to be able to love what you do and not hate your job every day. I love my job. I don't want to retire. There's so much more potential of what I can give back. And I wish that for everyone coming forward.
That's fantastic. I wish that too. To be able to love your job, to be able to look forward to Monday morning, I think is the real secret. I really do believe in that. And just that's the real success right there.
And making sure that songwriters and publishers get paid, that is so important.
Yes.
I'm happy I can contribute in my small way.
Oh, I'm so thankful to you. I'm thankful for your team. I'm thankful for all that you do. And continue to do and continue to champion new things that are coming around, and always thinking about your fellow musical human being. I think that's a great thing. And also all human beings with your volunteer work with UNICEF and everything else. I think that speaks so highly of you and just your drive and determination to make this world a better place. Thank you so much, Margaret.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. From the bottom of my heart, I'm very happy that you're here, that you were able to carve out some time for us. And I just thank you. I can't wait to see you again at the next event. And this is great. Now I know a little bit more about you, and now we can talk about so many other things rather than just, oh yeah, I kind of know you from the music industry, but yeah, this is great. Amazing. Thank you so much. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Okay. All the best. Bye-bye. Stay tuned for the next episode of Women in the Music Industry, coming soon. Let's embark on this incredible journey together, celebrating the women who are reshaping the music business one note at a time. If you enjoyed hearing this podcast, please take a moment and give it a like, a rating, or a follow. Your support helps immensely. We'll see you next time.